and we're back for the episode 8 Q&A. Why would Jaime help Brienne against the Crown? Aren't the Boltons wardens of the North for the Lannisters and the Crown? This makes no sense. Well, the show has been a little ambiguous with regards to the Boltons' relationship to the Lannisters and the Iron Throne. There was talk last season that the Ramsay-Sansa marriage would fully push the Boltons from the Lannisters' good graces. After all, marrying the suspected murderer of the king is pretty darn insulting. However, Roose didn't seem too concerned about the marriage because he thought the Lannisters were a spent force. So it sounded like Roose was thinking about northern independence. However, neither Roose nor Ramsay ever declared themselves king of the North, so it's a bit perplexing. It could be that Roose was aligned with another house that was scheming against the Lannisters, maybe the Tyrells or the Dornish. Maybe, but we don't really have any evidence of that. At the end of the day, the northern plot doesn't make too much sense, or at least not with the information that we've been given. In fact, let's review the northern plot. After the death of his father, Robb declares himself king of the North. Roose, after seeing Robb's blunder in marrying Talisa, aligns himself with the Freys and the Lannisters to usurp the Starks. However, Roose doesn't feel his hold on the North is strong enough, so he marries Ramsay to Sansa to secure the North, while alienating the Lannisters. However, Sansa escapes and Ramsay kills Roose. She attempts to rally the North against Ramsay, but can only really get House Hornwood, House Mazon, and House Mormont. So in the end, we find that only 3 houses, Hornwood, Mazon, and Mormont, really cared about the legitimacy of Sansa, the third being kind of irrelevant. So essentially, Roose's decision to marry Ramsay to Sansa and alienate the Lannisters was a pretty dumb trade. We actually know that the Lannisters have at least 8,000 men, while House Hornwood and Mazon probably have fewer than 1,000. Now yes, there are some other moving parts, like Ramsay securing the Umbers, who felt alienated from the Starks because of the wildlings. But regardless, the entirety of all the non-Bolton northern houses is probably smaller than the Lannister host. Roose's move is just plain dumb. So now back to Jaime. Yeah, helping Brienne sort of makes sense. At this point, the Boltons have proven themselves unloyal, and the Stark forces are unloyal, and the Tully forces are unloyal. The Lannisters have no real dog in the northern fight. Why not let them all fight each other and kill each other off? The more even the match, the weaker the winner will be when the smoke clears, and easier for the Lannisters to reassert control. Now yes, Sansa is accused of killing the king, but Jaime also vowed to protect her, so that's all a wash. I would also like to point out that all the Northern and Riverland fighting and infighting has essentially saved the Lannisters. The Freys took out the Starks, the Boltons took out Stannis and the Ironborn, and now the Vale forces might even get stuck up there. It all benefits the Lannisters, and Jaime is just continuing this tradition. Do you think D&D don't trust their audience to understand any kind of interesting plot twists, or just don't know how to write them? So I've put a bit of thought in how the Wolverine story happened. And I do put a lot of blame on D&D, but I also put some blame on the director, Mark Mylod. First of all, I do fundamentally think that the writers and the directors are underestimating their audience. I think they truly believe the audience is here for tits and dragons. If they throw enough violence and action and boobs and dick jokes in, hopefully they'll appeal to the masses. And who knows, they're probably right. Yes, there are lots of people out there who think the Hound decapitating randoms is quality entertainment. But I do think they are vastly underestimating the number of people out there who are here for the characters, the scheming, and the complexity. Think back to the last episode. What was the best scene? I would argue that it was the Edmure-Jaime scene. A scene involving 2 men talking in a tent. No tits, no action, no epic battles. This was hands down the cheapest and least technically impressive scene of the episode. And the dialogue wasn't even that great, but 2 things made the scene work. One, obviously, was the great acting. But the other thing was that there were real stakes. Jaime and Edmure were discussing the lives of thousands. Jaime's love for Cersei and the child of Edmure. There was real tension, a bit of game theory, and the audience, at least non-book fans, had no idea where the story was going. A scene with 2 men in a tent. Now let's compare that to the Wolverine story, a huge spectacle. As a recent Wall Street Journal article with the director reveals, the story really revolved around the idea that there would be, quote, a dazzling foot chase. So right off the bat, action is the driving force of the episode, and not, say, plot, or tension, or characters. So why didn't we give a shit about this dazzling foot chase scene? Well, ask yourself, why was the waif doing what she was doing? What was her motivation? Yeah, she apparently didn't like Arya, but why? Why did she want to kill her? Why did she want to make her suffer? Was it jealousy? Religious zealotry? Savagery? Did she fear Jaqen? Did she love Jaqen? What was at stake if she failed or succeeded? Would she be promoted? Would she be hurt? The waif was in plenty of episodes, and we had lots of time with the Wolverine plot. Remember, 15 minutes last season was spent solely on washing bodies. Frankly, we learned more about the motives of the playwright in Bravos than about the waif. But besides this problem with characters and motivation, there also seems to be a disconnect between the director and the writers. D&D simply wrote, dazzling foot chase. They may have intended Wolverine to be stumbling around clutching her stomach, but the director took it upon himself to escalate the chase scene to cartoonish levels, with leaps from second and third story windows, all because he wanted a cooler and more visually impressive action sequence to direct. Of course, cartoonish action destroys the suspension of disbelief. There are no stakes. There is no tension. Of course Wolverine is going to prevail. She just fell 3 stories and is fine. Why would I ever think the waif could kill her? So I had no investment in the waif because I knew nothing about her, and I had no investment in Wolverine because she was a cartoon. But also, besides basic things like characters and motivation and tension, I think many writers just throw logic to the wind. You know, I've heard a million times from people that people don't care about logic as long as there is a good story. Bull fucking shit. Of course people care about logic. The entire suspension of disbelief rests on internal logic, and it heavily affects characters and the story itself. Now yes, there's nitpicking, which I do for a bit of fun, but when major things don't make any sense, everything falls apart. Wolverine's invincibility and the completely twisted logic of Jaqen declaring that Wolverine was no one was just ridiculous. Nothing made sense about it. It was like there was no proofreader or editor. They wanted to get to this chase scene and this badass line at the end, I am Arya of House Stark, but none of it made sense. What was also kind of ridiculous is that there were so many ways to fix it. They could have just cut the whole scene where Wolverine goes to Lady Crane's house. The waif could have just attacked Wolverine on the bridge, and the chase scene could have begun there. Or, you know, the pig's bladder scheme could have worked, but somehow we got what we got. Ridiculous. Now I've ranted for way too long on this, so let us never speak of it again. Given that Kevin Lannister clearly knows about Cersei and Jaime's incest, and that all 3 of the children born from Cersei are completely illegitimate, what's he playing at letting Tommen make the deal of no more trial by combat with the High Sparrow? Surely he knows this will all turn out bad for not just Cersei, Jaime, and Tommen, but House Lannister as a whole. Well, yes, clearly a trial by battle is in the best interest of House Lannister, as Cersei would be absolved of both incest and regicide. But you have to remember that the High Sparrow still has Lancel under his control, so he has power over Kevin. I'm still unsure about the High Sparrow's power over Tommen. I'm unsure if Tommen is a true religious zealot, or if he's just scared of losing Marjorie. Tommen has been portrayed as such a weakling that it's hard to determine who's manipulating him. Whatever the case, it appears that Cersei currently has no power over Tommen. Anyway, it's important to note that it's in no one's best interest to find Cersei guilty of incest. In that situation, Tommen ceases to be king, and Marjorie ceases to be queen. This would mean that the High Sparrow, House Lannister, and House Tyrell would all lose their power. The kingship would pass to, well, we don't even know. A random Baratheon, I suppose? If one exists. Perhaps the High Sparrow could try to remove the taint of bastardy from Gendry, but that's not likely to go over too well. There would simply be chaos. And it seems the High Sparrow has no desire to have that happen. He seems to legitimately want Marjorie to birth a child with Tommen so he can continue his rule through proxy. Now the incest is still important, as Cersei, in a moment of anarchy, could reveal the incest and watch everything fall apart. What do you think the rumor Qyburn told is? How can the thousands of wildfire jars under the city be a rumor when Tyrion used them in the Battle of the Blackwater, and when there is a pyromancer's guild in the city? Well, we should all be thinking about wildfire because we saw wildfire burning underground just 2 episodes back in Bran's vision. Since that event didn't happen in the past, we really have to assume that it's going to happen in the future. And Dany does walk through a destroyed throne room in her vision in the House of the Undying. Additionally, in the book, there is mention of missing wildfire stashes all around the city. Every once in a while one is found, freaking people out, which explains where the rumors come from. Now it seems the wildfire in the vision is not the same wildfire that Tyrion is shown back in Season 2. It seems to be a different storage area. Essentially, this isn't Cersei and Tyrion's wildfire, which was used in the Blackwater. It's the Mad King Aerys' wildfire. Aerys had put wildfire all around the city to burn it down in case he lost the war. This is the primary reason why Jaime killed Aerys. But Jaime also killed Aerys' 3 pyromancers, Rossert, Garrigus, and Bellis, and with them died the locations of all the wildfire stashes. So really, in saving the city, Jaime kind of doomed the city as well. Now, if Cersei has the same idea that Aerys did, essentially flipping the board so no one can play the Game of Thrones anymore, we may see King's Landing going up in flames. How do you think George R. R. Martin feels about the awful writing and the stupid plot lines? To be honest, no matter how good or bad Game of Thrones was, I think he would be disappointed. How could he not be? George R. R. Martin is an insanely detail-oriented guy, and he has essentially been doing nothing but writing these books for over 20 years. These are books that, whether he wants them to be or not, will be his magnum opus and his legacy. Keep in mind, he has no children, and not too many other diversions. All day, every day, his life is about these books. The characters, the plots, when they will be done, all day, every day. By comparison, I'm a fairly detail-oriented guy who has been really focused on these books for about 3 years. And the show drives me absolutely nuts. But I have a job that has nothing to do with the books, and I have friends and a fiancé who have never read the books or seen the show. And I have quite a few other hobbies that are completely unrelated. My happiness, well-being, and my life aren't really wrapped up in this. This doesn't define me. These aren't my books. I can set this all aside if I wanted, and I will one day. But George R. R. Martin, the rest of his life and his legacy will be this, and essentially this alone. It's inescapable. You know, one of my favorite shows of all time was Community, and as fans of the show know, Dan Harmon was the producer for seasons 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. But not 4. Season 4 was done without him, and it was... whatever. I would say it was somewhat inferior in quality to the rest of the series, but certainly not horrible television. Harmon, though, hated it. He loathed it. In fact, he said, "There's something awesome about having all of those preconceived notions kind of ripped away from you. It's exciting. There's something awesome about being held down and watching your family get raped on a beach. It's liberating. It makes you focus on what's important." Now keep in mind, this was a silly show about friends sitting around a table bickering that occupied a mere 3 years of Dan Harmon's life at this point. But that's how one feels when one's creative baby is taken from you. Ice and Fire is over 2 decades in the making and makes enormous statements about George R. R. Martin's personal views on war, politics, and religion. So I would say it's impossible that George R. R. Martin likes the show. But keep in mind, even if it were Citizen Kane or Forbidden Planet, he would still hate it. Do you think there's a chance that Jaime and Edmure made an agreement so that he can enter his castle, gather his men, and surrender Blackfish, and in return, Jaime would agree that the Tullys can go north to help the Starks? What's next for Edmure? Why is Edmure betraying his house for his one-day wife and a never-met son? Well, I think there is very little chance that Edmure is heading north. Jaime's terms were very clear. Edmure, his wife, and his son will be hostages at Casterly Rock. Eventually, Edmure's son will be granted lands. Jaime's offer is not about Edmure's well-being and his love for a one-day wife or a never-met son. Jaime is offering Edmure the continuation of House Tully. He's offering him lands and an heir. Remember, House Tully is about family, duty, and honor. The entire Tully line is in danger of extinction. Jaime has the option of wiping them out like his father did to the Reynes and the Tarbecks. But he doesn't, because he's not like Tywin. So what's next for Edmure? Well, many people predict that House Frey will have a major disaster. In the book, they may have a civil war over various fiefs. However, the show is streamlining everything. So we may have something like Wolverine arriving and committing a mass poisoning of House Frey. If enough Freys die, Edmure's son might inherit something. Maybe Riverrun again. How many men are actually in the Brotherhood without banners? And what good will maybe 10 Raggedy Knights do against an army of White Walkers? Do you reckon the Brotherhood without banners will reinforce Jon's army at the last minute rather than the Knights of the Vale? So even in the book, it's unclear exactly how large the Brotherhood is. Harwin speculates that there could be thousands of members. But what's a member? If a random village allows them to sleep there, is every villager a member of the Brotherhood? In the show, the Brotherhood is large enough to cause the Freys trouble. Enough that they're mentioned with rebellious houses. So I do reckon there are hundreds, if not thousands, of fighting men in the Brotherhood. That said, I don't see how the Brotherhood could be useful in either the Battle of the Bastards or against the White Walkers. The Brotherhood is used to guerrilla warfare. They simply wouldn't be effective up north against traditional armies. But that said, Beric wants to head north. So apparently he disagrees with me. Now, as I said, there is likely going to be a twist at the Battle of the Bastards. Maybe it won't be the Vale army that shows up, or maybe the Vale army will turn on Jon. Some people think the Manderleys are going to show up because there's a casting call for a Manderley, but the Brotherhood is also a possibility, or Stannis, or the White Walkers sweeping in. Some sort of twist has to happen. Preston, which do you think is more likely to happen in the Dany plotline? A. The other 2 dragons are released so that all 3 dragons can wreak havoc on the fleet attacking, or Theon and Asha show up with their fleet and they hijack the ships of the slavers so all of them could be used to sail to Westeros. Well, actually, I think they're both going to happen. Next episode looks like they're going to try to put the plots back to where the books are. In the books, there's a battle of ice going on at the same time as the battle of fire. And here in the show, we have something very similar. In both book and show, the slavers are attacking Meereen. If the dragons are released and the Ironborn come in for a sneak attack, then the books and the show would be somewhat aligned. In fact, even the books hint at a Dothraki horde coming in. Keep in mind, when these scripts were written, they thought the Winds of Winter were just around the corner. Of course, the book is nowhere close to being released, but I can understand the strategy. Align the plot somewhat, and base Season 7 off of the Winds of Winter, and then deal with Season 8 when you get to it. But that's not going to happen. The Season 7 scripts are going to be written without the Winds of Winter. Still, we may have some remnants of that thinking. Season 6 has largely been a rewind to get us back to the same place we were at the end of Season 5. If you remember, at the end of Season 5, Cersei was still facing a trial, Arya was still being rebellious against the Faceless Men, armies were attacking Winterfell, and Meereen was descending into chaos. Bran was learning about his powers, Jaime was looking for something to do, Brienne was following Sansa, and Sam was heading to the Citadel. Really, the plot has not moved very much at all. Where is Varys going? To see Illyrio? To kill Kevin? Do you think Varys is going to Dorne to ask the Sand Snakes to support Dany? It seems like Tyrion didn't expect the Slavers' attack. Did Varys know about it and left Tyrion without telling him? Does it mean that Varys isn't really backing Dany? I do think Varys is going to King's Landing to kill Kevin and Pycelle. The A Dance with Dragons epilogue is pretty epic, and it occurs on the first day of winter. The last episode is called The Winds of Winter. It would be pretty interesting if an Aegon plot were actually still going to happen. It would explain why Varys didn't tell Tyrion about attacking slavers, and why he wanted to get out of town before Dany arrived. Though one could argue that he allowed everything to fall apart in Slaver's Bay because he was trying to motivate Dany to head to Westeros. It's hard to say, and in the book, Dany's role in the Illyrio plot is largely still a mystery, so I'm not even sure if the showrunners have decided on Varys' loyalties. As for the Sand Snakes, I guess I'd like them to show up in the Sam plot at the Citadel. That is, if Sam is still going to the Citadel. Anyway, that's all for now. I'll see you guys in a few days for episode 9.